Big Food's day of reckoning has finally arrived.
This is all poison, and they knew it.
Healthcare is not the only thing that's under attack right now. I was scrolling through Reddit and I found this post on r/TikTok cringe. And this guy was talking about major food companies being sued. Today we're going through the wormhole of Big Food, and we're going to see how dark these secrets get.
A bombshell lawsuit has just been filed, basically naming every single big food company, and there's some pretty damning evidence in it. Before I get into the details, the first thing to understand is what we know today as Big Food was once legacy Big Tobacco. Because after people realized how bad cigarettes were for you and smoking dropped off a cliff, these guys had to figure out a different way to make money. In other words, a different substance to addict us, right? The Philip Morris Gulfstream isn't going to pay for itself.
It's funny how most of these conspiracies aren't necessarily about evil or taking over the world. It's just about how can we make more money. So I find that interesting. I can't imagine the legal team behind these big food companies, especially going against all of them at the same time. I can't imagine the army of lawyers that are going to defend these companies.
All right, let's dig into this lawsuit. Quote, Big Tobacco's conquest of the U.S. food environment was much more than a coincidental byproduct of diversification. Instead, as explained by Philip Morris's director of applied research, the purpose of these acquisitions was for the big tobacco companies to, quote, all of the pleasure drugs that are not regulated.
Wow. I just like the language he used there, drugs. I don't even know if I can say that. Referring to food as a drug. It's just crazy. I mean, even this conspiracy has been in the works for a long time. There is a famous book called Salt, Sugar, Fat, and it really kind of blew the lid off this whole conspiracy going on. But it's almost so believable. In my opinion, it didn't really make as much waves as I feel like it should have. Now, this is what's in the book of Salt, Sugar, Fat, and just read these titles. Exploiting the biology of the children. How do you get people to crave? I want to see a lot of body bags. I mean, these are intense accusations. Just guessing, some of the things in this book are going to correlate with what this guy is saying on TikTok, but let's keep looking.
So what did they do? They bought up all the big food companies and started turning foods into drugs. They started experimenting on people to see how our brains would react to certain ingredients or certain chemicals.
Okay, I have heard things about them doing tests, but I haven't heard about them actually hooking you up to some kind of MRI machine and measuring brain activity that way. I thought it was just like a taste test. This is pretty bad. Even on Dr. Pepper, if you zoom in on the can, or you just pay attention next time you're having one, it says 23, which is the amount of flavors that it took them to get that right taste. So in a weird way, they're bragging about the tests that they do, but I'm sure people knew, okay, they're hooking them up to MRI machines, they're testing on maybe animals. Like, it gets pretty interesting.
It says here, for example, Dr. Frank Galata was a Philip Morris brain scientist who supervised a secret Philip Morris addiction laboratory in Germany. Galata's research included using electrodes on human scalps to understand the impact of nicotine consumption on the human brain. He became integrated into the company's food operations after the acquisition of General Foods and Kraft. I mean, these psychopaths literally embedded microchips into rats. They literally cut open their brains and embedded what they call brainwave computer systems.
Okay, using rats, I mean, that's beyond capitalism at that point. But let me know what you guys think in the comments, because is that a bad take? Let me know.
Oh, but that wasn't the end. They got to figure out who to sell this to. And they figured out it was going to be kids. The lawsuit alleges Big Tobacco repurposed marketing strategies designed to sell cigarettes to children and minorities and aggressively marketed ultra-processed foods to these groups.
Okay, this is where it gets a little more nefarious. Targeting kids. I mean, I don't think there's any excuse for that. I mean, it wouldn't take an expert to look at most food and believe that it's marketed towards kids, just based on the labels, the coloring, the package, all of that. Pretty crazy. I've heard rumors of Congress or someone banning food coloring for these companies so that they're no longer able to kind of disguise what the food really is. It'd be interesting to see if it passes, because I can't imagine the red tape in the food industry, even just to reverse things. I mean, if it is true that the cigarette companies purchased or somehow acquired these bigger food companies, they're no stranger to lobbying. So I can't imagine the amount of legal hurdles that they've set up in order to protect themselves in this way, but it would be interesting to see that.
A Philip Morris executive boasted at a UFP industry conference, quote, "We've decided to focus our marketing on kids where we know our strength is the greatest." And the worst part is, they knowingly sacrificed the health of America's children in exchange for profit.
I mean, saying that in public at a conference, I mean, I don't think the judge or the jury or however this is going to be set up, I don't think there's going to be mens rea for whoever said that, any kind of regret. It would seem very calculated, very cold, cunning. This is purely business to them. I think there's going to be some crazy consequences if this gets to court.
It says here in April 1999, the CEOs of America's largest ultra-processed food companies attended a secret meeting in Minneapolis to discuss the devastating public health consequences of ultra-processed foods and their conduct. At that meeting, a Kraft executive told the other CEOs in attendance that obesity was reaching epidemic proportions, especially among children, who are at higher risk of developing chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and cancer. And that's exactly what happened in the last 25 years. Obesity exploded. Rates of diabetes through the roof. Chronic disease skyrocketing. Instead of listening to the science, they literally paid to be the science.
This is the hardest part, right? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In this book, Salt, Sugar, Fat, it talked about how they pick the best and the brightest from Harvard, Stanford. They look at the smartest people with biology degrees, chemistry degrees, and they end up getting hired by Lay's or Coca-Cola in order to modify the taste of the products so that it will be as addicting as possible. And of course, we see this with social media on apps like TikTok, where people are paid, like they get their livelihood on trying to make the app as addictive as possible just so they can make some more money. But when it comes to food and these are the results, it's amazing the impact this will have on thousands and thousands of kids. I mean, it's kind of funny when you think about it. Oh, like there's this big conspiracy with like food companies. Like it sounds like out of a movie until you figure out it's food, like fast food. What? Like that's the big like conspiracy that's like actually going on, but it's not. I mean, it's kind of funny, right? Thinking, oh, cupcakes or Little Debbie's. You know what I mean? Just it's funny thinking how there's this big grand scheme behind it all, and it's Fruity Loops. You know what I mean? Now, a legal side note, if I accidentally say a brand name that is not associated with this, that's on me. I'm sorry. But it seems like most of these companies are in the wrong, and they've all been kind of playing this game to stay competitive.
Dietitians were paid by Big Food to push junk foods and anti-diet advice. They also paid off universities to influence the outcome of academic research. And this last example is outrageous. Companies like Coke literally colluded, worked with the NAACP to call parents who were concerned with their child's high sugar intake and smeared them as racist. I mean, these companies, these executives, are basically committing treason against Americans by doing this. It's outrageous.
I mean, those last couple just sound more like rumors, if I'm being honest. But just the thought of, think of this smartest kid that you've ever met. Like they won like the Science Olympiad. They went on to Harvard. They got straight A's, like top 1% of their class, overachiever, wicked smart, and they get hired by Frito-Lay. Like all that talent, like all that gifting is just going to making food more addictive for kids. It's like it's just so weird. It's so strange to think about that.
And as I say, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So if you care about the health of children and the future of America, please share this message far and wide. Thank you.
If you want to learn more, please read that book that I mentioned, Salt, Sugar, Fat. There are some wild stories of people that had to remain anonymous to share their insight. Like it sounds funny to think that companies that make snacks could be this dark. Not in the sense of like how it's portrayed in Hollywood, so to speak, with like money laundering, crime. Like not in the sense of like a classic criminal organization, but I mean, giving diabetes to kids. And of course, the parents are also at fault for buying this for the kids. But I mean, that is just a dangerous game, especially with so many kids affected. But if you thought that was the only thing happening on Reddit or TikTok, you'd be wrong. There is a business guru, Wes Watson, who has absolutely memed himself, and it's pretty funny. If you want to check out that video, click here. I'll see you in the next one.